Learn Python from scratch, the easiest way possible. Hi, I'm Vivin Arana, and I would like to welcome you to the world of coding. Story time. Picture this: you have a cool idea for a new app or game, maybe something that recommends outfits based on the weather, or a simple text based adventure where you roam a haunted castle. Now, how do you bring it to life? You tell a computer exactly what to do, step by step, in a language it understands. That language is Python. Python is like learning how to chat with your computer. Instead of random beeps and boops, you'll use words and symbols to get the computer to do awesome stuff for you, whether it's math, playing music, creating a website, or making a game. So let's go ahead and set up our coding space. So first step is to go to python.org and install Python on your machine. To do that, you'll go to python.org, and this is the website for Python where you can learn everything about Python that you can, or you can just follow along with me. And then go to downloads and make sure, depending on what computer you're using, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, or other, install that particular Python version. If you're using Windows, you can go in here and download Python from here. For Linux or Unix machines, you can get it from there. If you're using Mac OS, you can install from there. And by default, it will tell you, it will detect automatically what you are running, and it will ask you to install that version right here. So why are we doing this? You need Python on your computer so it understands the magical code you'll write. Think of it as installing a translator who speaks both computer and English. Now, picking up an editor. Now, to write your code, you'll need one of these editors. The first editor that you can get is Thonny, which is from thonny.org. This is a super beginner friendly, it's like a warm hug that helps you learn. Next, we have the Visual Studio Code or VS Code, which is very popular, powerful, and a lot of pros use it. You might like all the colorful plugins. And finally, we have Google Colab, which we'll be using during our course, so we don't have to install anything on the computer, because a lot of times when you try to install things, they break. So instead of running through those issues, why not just use something on the cloud? So as I mentioned, you can go to thonny.org and install it from here. This is one option that you have. Or you can go to code.visualstudio.com and download Visual Studio for you. Or, as what we are going to do in this course, is go to collab.research.google.com, sign in with your Google account, or if you don't have one, create one, and then start coding from here by saying File, New Notebook in Drive, and it will open a new space or a coding space for you to code. And we will look at it in more detail in the next section. So once you've installed Python and chosen an editor, or you decide to do it, follow along with me and do it on the cloud, you're basically set up your coding studio. This is the place you'll create and test all your masterpieces. Next, let's jump into your first line of code. So what we will be doing here is we'll be writing our first Python script. Now to do that, I'm going to open my browser and go to collab.research.google.com. I'm going to close everything here. I don't need any of these. And I'm going to say File, New, Notebook and Drive. It will create a new notebook. The first thing is always make sure you name your file. So I'm going to say first code.ipynb, which means this is a file called as first code. The name is first code, and it's of the type interactive Python notebook. So that's what we're creating here. So it's kind of, you have a notebook where you keep on writing stuff, writing code snippets, and then come back to it whenever you want. And this is my first code.ipynb. I'm going to go ahead and type my first script. I'm going to call a function. Now, what are functions? Functions is something that we're going to discuss about a little later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a function called as print. Function means a thing to do for the computer. So I am telling Python that, hey Python, print hello world for me. So when I do this, I am telling I'm telling Python that, hey, print hello world for me, and Python goes, which is a translator, goes to the computer and says, programmer wants us to type hello world and display it to the user opening it. I'm going to go ahead and press this play button right next to it, or it will says here control enter is another option. It takes a little bit of time first time, so have some patience, but going forward it will be much more faster. So we'll run through that code and it will print me hello world. If I say hello Vivian and then run it, it will change that and says hello Vivian. And if you noticed, you see how fast it is. Now usually if you're creating a file, you would probably create as this as hello.py, which is a Python file on your computer, and save it and run it from your command prompt or your terminal, depending on which machine you're using. But if you're using cloud, you can directly run it from your browser itself. So congratulations, you just told the computer to display a greeting. It's a small step, but every coding journey starts with hello world. Next, let's jump into variables, your virtual boxes. Imagine your room filled with boxes, each labeled with a name. There's a phone charger box, there's a snacks box, there's a guitar picks box. In coding, variables are like these boxes. You label them and put stuff inside them. So let's go ahead and see some examples. I'm going to go here and I'm going to say I want to write another code snippet and click on code. And then here I'm going to create a variable name. Name is the name of my variable, and I'm going to say name is Vivian. It helps me type this without doing anything. This is a string text, which means it's characters inside double quotes. So it's a string. So that's a string text, which means this name variable is saving a string variable, and the value of that string variable is Vivian. You can change this to whatever you want. You put it your name or put hello world in there, but that's what a string variable looks like. This is a string variable. So think of it as a box which has strings inside it, which has characters inside it. Next, I'm going to create an integer, which are whole numbers. I'm going to say age. Now age is a variable which has integers inside it. I'm going to say 15 here. So this again, this is a box which is named as age, and it contains whole numbers inside it, which is also called as integer in programming languages. Next, I'm going to create something called as height. Now what happens if it's not a whole number? For example, my height is, let's say, 5'8". So I say 5.8. Now this is called as a decimal number or a float number. So this in programming languages is called as a float. So the box which is called as height has a float value inside it, and that value is 5.8. Now there's also something called as a boolean, which is true or false. So I'm going to say, is this person a gamer? I created a box which is called which tells me if this person is a gamer or not, and I can set it to true or false. Now this is a boolean, which means the value of this can be true or false. If I'm not a gamer, I'll say false. If I'm a gamer, say true. So boolean can have only two values, true or false. Height, as I mentioned, this is a float or a decimal number, so it can have a lot of numbers inside it. Age is whole numbers, so these are integers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's what this contains. And name is a string which you can tell by double quotes. If I remove this, what it means is I'm trying to assign another variable to it, which is not true. So I'm going to give quotes here at the end of it, which means this is the string variable. So we have a string variable, we have an integer variable, we have a float variable, and we have a boolean variable here. Now if I want to display these out, I can just say print, and I am not going to directly print it. If I directly want to print it, as the computer is telling me, I can do this. I can say print, I can print name, I can print age, oops, I can go ahead and print height, I can go ahead and print is gamer. Now if I try to print this, let's go ahead and press play here. It will execute this and it will go through this. It will create a box called as name. So what Python is telling the computer is create a box, name it name, and assign the value Vivian inside it. Age, assign the value 15. and so computer is creating in its hard disk this particular data and saves it there. And then when I say print, it will go to that box, find what the name is, and display it outside for me. So this is how this works. Now, next option is how do I make it look more pretty? So I can also say that I want to print name, and I can just say comma. So what this will do is it will say name of this person is Vivian. So it kind of gives a nice label. So similarly, age, I can say comma, this is the age of Vivian. This is height of Vivian. Let me just make sure I put colons everywhere, and make sure you have your commas in place or it will not work. And I'm gonna say is gamer. I'm gonna put a question mark here, and then that will tell me whether it's true or false. I'm gonna go ahead and execute it again. And you see name is Vivian, age is 15, height is 5.8, and is gamer is true in this particular case. So now what we are doing is you can open the box called name here anytime to see what the stored value is. In this particular case, we have name as Vivian. I can create another code piece here. And if I print name here, again, it will still work and it'll save it into that box. So every time I want to remove it, I can remove it and check it out. So that covers our variables. Let's go to our next section, which is talking to the user or taking an input from the user from the coding interface. It's like when you log into your gaming console, and you say that, oh, I want to play a game, and you'll ask, what is your name? And you enter a name inside there. So we're going to do something like that. So I'll go back to my browser, and here in my new coding parameter, if you don't have this, just press this code button and a new snippet will be available for you to type here. I'm going to say user underscore name. So I want to know what the user's name is. So I'm going to creating a variable called as username. And then I'll take input from user. So I'm going to say input, and I'm going to ask the user, what's your name? Question mark. So what this does is it calls this input function, just like our print function. It will call this input function and it will print this out to me and expect an answer from the user. So if I just run this here, you'll see it says, what's your name? And it's asking me input, and I can say Vivian Arana, enter. And then username value is Vivian Arana. Now I can do a little bit more, is I can say print welcome, comma, and then I'll say username. Now when I run this, I'll play it. It says, what's your name? And I say Vivian, enter. It says, welcome Vivian. So it will go through this line and wait for the user to enter the value before running into the next file. So what we're doing here is we are doing some hardcore coding. Now coding is a conversation with your computer, but what if you want a conversation with the person using your program? That's where input comes in. Now when we run this, as you saw, your program will stop and wait until the user types something. Then it prints a greeting to your user. And if you want to make it more prettier, you can go here and say plus. So what you're doing is you're adding values, but this username is a variable and the rest of the items that I have is more of a string. So I have to put everything under string, and I'm going to say add this whatever the variable is in here. If I remove this here and just type it something like this, it will just type welcome comma plus username value, but I don't want that. I want whatever user entered the variable, I want to get that. So print command looks at what did you enter, and if there's any variables in there, it will take that variable and add it depending on how you display it out there. And now when I play it, it's going to ask me again, what's your name? And I'm going to say Vivian, enter. It says welcome comma Vivian this. And if you want to format it nicely, you can always do that and enter any random value, and it says welcome comma random, and you can play around with it. I hope you were able to get it. If you had any questions or had any issues here, let me know in the messages. Now to move on to our next step, we're going to do some math magic. Now who needs a calculator when you have Python? Let's do some quick math. So I'll go ahead here, create a new code snippet, and here I'm going to create a variable first, x equal to 3. Next, I'm going to create another variable y equal to 10. Now, what type of variables these are? Now, based on what you learned earlier, these are integer types of variables. Now, if I want to do some math here, I can just type print x plus y. What this does is it takes the first integer and adds it with second. Now, similarly, why didn't it add stuff here? Because this is a string. In string, it just concatenates different strings together and makes an entire sentence out of it. But here, since these are numbers, these are integer types, and they are not inside something like quotes. If I put quotes here, it will display to me 310, something like this. But if I remove this, it will take the number 3 and the number 10 and add it like a calculator. Next, I can also do print y minus x. The reason I'm doing y minus x is y is a bigger number. You can do x minus y2 and it will give you a negative numbers. I can do print, what are the other math? X times y. So this will do a multiplication operation. Next, I'm going to want to do a division operation, which is x divided by y. Next, I want to do integer division, which what it does is it will drop the decimal places, because if you look at 3 divided by 10, it should be like 0.333 something. So it will give me 0 in this particular case. So that is done by using double slash. I can, to make it more clear, I can do y divided by x, and same thing here. Oops, y, yeah, there you go. Our next thing that I want to show is a modulus, which kind of gives you the remainder of the operation. So in this particular case, I'm going to say y modulo x. So it will try to see what is the divisor of this, so and give me the remainder of that. So for example, 3 times 3 is 9. How much is left? Remainder 1. And that's what this will show me as an output. Next, I can do print y star star x. This will give me 10 to the power of 3, which is 1000, and that's what will be displayed to me. Let's go ahead and play it. And as you can see, x plus y is 13, y minus 3 is 7, x times y is 30, then 3.333 for y divided by x, and y integer division gives me just 3 and drops all the points. Remainder y mod x modulo operation will give me 1, and my x raised to 3 will give me 1000. So try making a little calculator program for yourself. It's a perfect beginner project. Next, it's decision time. If, else, if, else. Now in real life, you make decisions all the time. If it's raining, grab an umbrella. Else, just wear shades. Now Python does the same. So we're going to go ahead and write some decision code. So I'm going to go back to my browser and go ahead and create a new code. And here I will say first age equal to integer of, so I'm going to ask user what is your age, and for that I'm going to say input, enter your age. The reason I am saying int in front is because if I just do this, whatever user enters will be taken as string. So if I enter 25, it will just enter my age as 25 as a string. But I want to convert it into an integer. So I can say, I can add int in front of it in brackets, and then whatever input user enters, so if I say 25, it will convert that into a number, an integer number, and assign it to age. So that's why I'm using int here. And now it's decision time. So I'm going to ask a question. If age, I'm asking the computer, if age is greater than equal to 18, I'll say print you are an adult. Else print, or else print you are a minor. So that's an if else statement. So now not both will be ever displayed, because if I enter my age as 18, it will display the first one, you are an adult. If I say 15, it will not print this one because this is false here. If age is greater than equal to 18, if I say 15, it is less. So it will say print, you are a minor. So go ahead and run this. It will ask me, what's your age? And I'm going to say 15. And it goes through this and it looks at this decision here, makes a decision, looks at the value and checks it's 15, which means it should not run this, and it will run else loop here. I'll print this. If I run it again, and this time I'll say my age is 33, enter. You see you are an adult because it runs through this decision here if age is greater than 18, which is true in this case, and it will print this and it will ignore the else side of it. I can also use else if, where I can say here ELIF, that is else if age is, let's say, greater than 13, you are a teenager, else you are a minor. If it's less than that, then it's a minor. So if I run this here, and now I have three different conditions that I have to looking for. If I am 25, it will say you are an adult in this particular case. If I run it again, and I'll say my age is 15, in this case, it will, I just stopped this, let me run it again. If I say 15 and enter, it will check the value here, greater than 18, nope. And then it will check else if age is greater than equal to 13, it is, it's 15. So it'll say you are a teenager. And one more case, if I say I am 10 years old and run it, it says you are a minor. So that's how if else works. Now next, we are going to look at loops, which are repeating actions. There are two different loops that I want you to look at. First is the while loop, where you want to go over something over and over again until a particular scenario is met. For example, maybe you want to do 10 jumping jacks, so you keep counting until you hit 10. So that's how you write a loop. Now you don't want to write it hard coded into the code where you can say, okay, jumping jack 1, jumping jack 2, 3, 4. Instead of that, you can write a loop. So let's look at how to write a while loop. I'm going to go ahead and open my browser, and here I'm going to create another code piece, and in this particular case I'll say count equal to 0. So I'm creating an integer variable here, and then I'm checking if while count is less than 5, in this particular case I am going to say count is this value, and then I want to reduce the count. Now the one way to do reduce the count is count minus 1. So what I'm doing here is I'm checking, is count less than 5? In this case it's 0, so I am going to say, so I think I have an error here. Instead of reducing, I want to increase it. The reason is I'm checking if the count is less than 5, it is less than 5. I'm going to say print count is, in this particular case it will print as 0, and then it will go ahead and increment the value of count by 1. So whatever the initial value is 0, it will increment by 1, and now the value of count is 1. And it checks again, while count is less than 5, 1 is less than 5. So it's going to go ahead and print it again. Again it will go in and increase the value. From now 1 becomes 2. Now this is increment operator, where you can directly say, instead of doing that extra work, you can say plus equal to 1, where it increments. If you want to decrement, you minus equal to 1. So since I want to increment, I'm going to do this, and now when I run through it, what it will do is initially it will print when the value of count is 0, it's a print count is 0, then add 1 to it. Now the value of count is 1. It will check again. I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4. Now when it's printing count is 4 here, it will check count, it will increment by 1. Now value becomes 5. Now is count less than 5? Is it still less than 5? 5 is not less than 5. 5 is equal to 5. So it will come out and close the program. That's what's happening here. Now this code, as you can see, prints the count from 0 to 4 one by one. Now if I want to do it for 10 times, you can save it, run it, it will say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 until value is met. Similarly, you can do 100, thousands, whatever you feel like, you can add it here. Next, I want to talk about for loop. Now, for loop is used where you have a list of chores and you want to go through them one by one. So you are given a list in this particular case. So for example, you have 10 video games and you want to find the right game to play. So you go through each one of them until you find it. And when you find it, you can stop going through the disk set, or you can just keep on continuing if you want to see if you have 2 of those. So I am going to go ahead, add another code snippet here, and then I'm going to say video underscore games equal to, and I'm going to make a list. Now to make a list, I can use square brackets, and inside that I can say game 1. Next I can say game 2. Next game 3. So let's say I have 3 games here. Now I want to go through each and every game and then print these games that I have. So for that I can say for game in video games, I want to print the game name. So what it does is it will go through each and every one inside here. So first it will go to the first one. It looks at this name and assigns it to this and then prints it out. Then it goes to the next one, does the same thing, assigns it to this variable game and prints it out third. So it will keep on going through that. So if I run this, and as you can see, it prints each and every game out for you. So that's our while loop and for loop. Next, let's look at lists, where you keep track of all your stuff, like video games that we just did. Now a list is a playlist on Spotify. It contains a bunch of items in a particular order. So let's say your music orders. Now of course you can shuffle them, but let's say if you want to go through in a particular order, that's what lists are used for. Now, let's look at some of the functionalities that lists provide. So we already created a list here. We have a game list. Now I am going to go ahead and comment this. When I put the hashtag or pound in front of any of my line in code, what Python does is it just ignores that line of code. So if you see here, nothing is happening because it just go through this and then it will ignore this and it will ignore this. So what this pound sign does, it tells the computer, the code is telling the computer, just ignore it, don't do anything with it. So all it does is it creates a list with 3 games inside here. Now if I want to look at my first game, I'm going to say video game of 0. I don't want to see all of them, so I'm going to just say video game of 0. What that will do is that will just print me the item in the first element. Now why didn't I say 1 here? The way lists work is they start with an index 0. So this is 0, this is game 1, and this is game 2. How many items do I have? I have 3 items in here. So length of this list will be 3, but the index or the ranking starts with this is the 0, this is 1, and this is 2. So if I say video games of 0, it will print me the first item in here, which is game 1. Now next, I can add items to this video games list. I can say video games dot append. I want to append a game 4. And now if I want to look at what I have inside this video games variable, it's already was a list of 3 items and I'm saying append add game 4. So I should see the 4th game. I'm going to go ahead and comment this because I don't want to see this line printed. It goes through this and it looks at this and it will print out game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4. I can also change a particular item inside here. I can say video underscore games, and inside the first item for index 1, which is this one, index 1, I want to change that and call it game 8. So think about it, you have a drawer of or a box of items and then you want to remove the second item and replace it with something else. That's what I'm doing here. Now let's go ahead. I'm going to take this code here, put it down here and run. So if you see game 1, game 8, game 3, game 4. What happened to game 2? So what I did by doing this is I took the game 8 and I replaced game 2 with it. I threw away the game 2 and game 8 was added in place of game 2. And that's how you do that in lists. So that takes us to functions. Now we have already called some functions. We've called the print function. We've called the input functions. What functions let you do? Let you build your own commands. So whatever functions we've used till now are the ones that are available by Python, which was print and input. But now imagine you can do a certain task a lot, like sending a greeting message. Instead of copying the same code repeatedly, you define a function once and then call it whenever you want. So for example, let's go back to the code and create a new one. And here I am going to create a function. The way to create a function is you say def. This is how you define a function. and then you give the name of the function, say underscore hello. So that is my function name. And inside here, so if I want to put anything inside a function, I give a colon and then enter next line and make sure this is indented, because whatever is indented is in part of the function. So I can say print hello from your very first function. Okay, so that's there. Now I'm going to get out of the function by going back, and I'll call that function by saying say hello and then brackets next to it. So that's how you create a very simple function, and I can call it like multiple times. It will, let's say, it will keep on printing hello from your very first function, hello from your very first function. Depending on how many times you call it, it will call this function and it does whatever you ask it to do inside the function. So that's how functions work. Now we've seen like print, and then we gave some video games inside here. There's no value here. So these things are called parameters. The variables that you give inside are called parameters. So what I am going to do is I'm going to say that this function takes a parameter called as person name, and then instead of like here, I am going to append to that the person name to it. So it says hello, whatever the name is, hello, let's say I pass Vivian, hello Vivian from your very first function. That's what will be printed. Now this doesn't exist anymore here. Since I say hello and I gave empty brackets here, it doesn't exist anymore because this function takes a parameter. So I can say here hello Vivian, and I'm going to remove everything else. Now what happens here is I say hello, and instead of giving a variable, I gave the value of a variable, which is a string. It will take that string value and assign it to this variable, and then it will say print hello, pass that variable name's value in here. You say hello Vivian in this case from your very first function. I run it and say hello Vivian from your very first function. Now if I want to change this to, let's say, Clyde, and run it, it will say hello Clyde from your very first function. Now depending on what the user says their name is, you can give a personalized message and just call this, and don't have to write this as a part of your code, and you can reuse this as many times as you want. Now another thing that this can do is it can also return, functions can return values back to whoever called it. So for example, I want to create another function which multiplies two numbers. So this takes two numbers. You have to pass two numbers as parameters, and what it will give you back, it will return back. So you have to specifically say a return a times b, and then I'll go to the next line, and here I will say result. I'll create a variable called as result equal to, let's say, multiply 3 comma 5. So what I'm doing here is I'm calling this function multiply, and I'm passing values 3 and 5 to this. So variable a's value will be 3, variable b's value will be 5, and it will return back a times b, 5 times c, 15, back to this result variable, and then I'm printing this out here. I can always say result comma, make it look nice, play, and now if you see here, result is 15. Now I just change the value here, let's say 15 times 3, run it, and it'll say 45. How about 30 times 15? It'll just be one more 0, 450. So there you go. So this is how you can pass or call this multiply function again and again, bunch of different times. So this brings us to our next part, which is a mini project, number guessing game. So we will be writing a game using whatever we have learned till now. We'll use random numbers, we'll use loops, we'll use conditionals, we'll use input from the user, you name it, we'll use everything. Again, we've not looked at random numbers, but we will be creating random numbers. So to do that, first, let me go to my browser, and I'm going to create a new code here. And inside this, I'm going to import something called as random. Now this is a library that Python provides us, which has some functionalities or functions that creates random numbers for us. So I am going to say secret number. This is what computer will give me, random dot random integer 1 comma 10. So what this will do is This will create me a random integer number between 1 and 10, and that will be assigned to secret number. Now I don't know it, you don't know it, we don't know what it is. The only person who knows about this secret number is our Python code and the computer which generated it. So I am going to say the user has 3 attempts to solve this. So I'm giving user an opportunity of 3 attempts, which I will reduce every time user guesses the number. Next, I'm going to tell the user print I am thinking of a number, if I can type properly, between 1 and 10. So I'm asking the user, can you guess a number? Now I'm going to check first while attempts is greater than 0. So if the user has still any attempts left, the user has 3 attempts, attempts is greater than 0, I'm going to say guess equal to integer input. Since user has options, I'm going to say take a guess. Another good part about this editor here of Google Colab editor is it completes your code for you. So if you are stuck somewhere, it will help you complete the code for you. So anyways, so now I am taking a user's input here. User will say, let's say 5, that I'm converting into int, and I'm assigning it to value guess. So then I am going to check here if guess is equal to secret number. I'm going to say congratulations, you have guessed the number, or I'll say break. So I'll get out of this loop and I'll say else. If guess is less than, I'm going to say too low, else I'll say too high, and then I am reducing the attempt by one more, -1. Next, I'm going to check how many attempts are left. If attempts, oops, attempts equal to 0, I'm going to say sorry, you run out of attempts. The secret number was whatever the number was. So what I'm doing is I'm telling the user you have 3 attempts and asking the user, so if the attempts is greater than 0, so first time it will be 3 attempts. User will say, let's say the secret number is 5. The user will say, let's say 8, and then I'll check if 8 is equal to 5. It's not. So I'm going to say, wait, your number is too high. The number is 5. So kind of depending on what the user guesses, I will give them a hint saying too low or too high, and then I will reduce the number of attempts. Again, the user will try to guess, and if the user runs off all the attempts, which is 0, then I'll say sorry, you've run out of attempts. The secret number was, I'll give the number. So let's go ahead and play this game, and if let's see if everything works fine. Say play. Think your number between 1 and 10. Take a guess. I'm going to say 5, and it says too low. Try again. So it means it's between 5 and 10. So I'm going to say my second attempt, I'll say 7, and it says too low. Try again. So that means it's between 7 and 10. So I'm going to say 8. Too low. Try again. So I think it was, in this case it was 10 and not 8. So it guessed a number very high. I'm going to run it again. Take a guess. I'll say 5. Too low. I'm going to say 8. Too low. What is again? 10 again. Congratulations, you guessed the number. It guessed 10 twice. Let's try again. Let's see. I'm going to say 5. Too low. Is it 10 again? Too high. Okay, so it's between 5 and 10. I'll say 8. Oh no, it was 9. It's kind of trying to guess pretty high numbers. Let's see if it can guess a low number. 5 too low. Okay, again. 10 too high. 8. No, it was 6. Anyways, enjoy this game. I hope you were able to build this game and play with it. If you had any questions or issues while implementing this, let me know. And now I think you're ready to deep dive into Python programming.